This video is sponsored by EA. Fair monetization. Well-researched sponsorships.
EA Games.
Challenge everything.
Guys, it's not sponsored by EA. Don't worry, it's not sponsored, but we did get a free copy.
That was surprising, actually.
A copy. We were
EA,
very surprised.
it was the very first EA game that they'd sent us in like 2 years.
Since when? Literally.
I think it's because they know it's a good game, so they were like, you guys can have this
Yep.
one, whereas everything else they don't send us.
Yep, last time one we got, I think, was Star Wars Battlefront 2. Legitimately.
Did we get that?
I think so. Anyway.
I don't remember getting that.
Well, like, guys, it is Star Wars fever at the moment, okay? We've got the new Star Wars coming out on, like, the 21st. We're going to review that, too. We've got, you know, Jedi Fallen Order. We've got Mandalorian, which has been incredible. So excited for Season 2. Can't believe they got Alex Jones for it.
I have seen, I know who the enemy is, and let me tell you, they are vicious wolves who hate you and your family. They're frickin' interdimensional invaders. What do I do, Lord?
Destroy the child. Corrupt them all.
This is their plan, people. These are demons. It's basically an intergalactic invasion into this space through people. I'm telling you, it's what all the ancients said, it's what they warned of, it's what we're dealing with. But everyone already innately knows this.
So Sam, let's start with your high-level thoughts on this game. What do you think of Jedi Fallen Order?
I think Jedi Fallen Order is a perfectly fine game. I think that...
Perfectly cromulent.
It's perfectly cromulent, everybody, okay? I think it's... I was pleasantly surprised. I sat there from like 6 a.m. or whatever till 2 a.m. in one sitting and just played it. I very rarely sit there and just do
the
that.
entire thing in one
I just loved it. I was not busy. I was like, all right, let's do this all day and have no life. And it was one of those games that just kept me, you know, very interested the whole time. I felt like, you know, as a complete package, I really thoroughly enjoyed this, and I thought, what a great way to get back to a spot, EA, where you're making something good in the Star Wars space.
For sure. Okay.
No
do
pun intended with
you
space.
feel like its components were really good? Because I think a lot of people have views about that.
I mean, you have views about that.
I think most people have
Not
views
everyone
about
has
that.
views because you have views
I think
about
most
that.
people have views about how good this is as a game versus as like a piece of Star Wars.
I mean, okay, well, let's just go bit by bit then, and let's actually break this down. So let's start with the story then, okay? The story, in terms of the story, what did I think of the story? I think it was a fine Star Wars story. It's exactly what I wanted from a Star Wars movie. It wasn't like incredibly deep. It was just like, look, here's some characters. Here's a bit of a journey through that kind of character story. But the main vehicle of that, of course, is let's explore different planets and show the Star Wars world while you get to know these characters. And I felt like they did a great job of that. I liked Cal Kestis. I think he was a cool dude. I liked the characters surrounding him. I liked that you saw him, you know, go from a kind of like a Skywalker story, like, you know, this kind of dude working on some planet. And then, you know, as the story goes on, his, you know, connection to the Force deepens. That's all I'll say for now. No spoilers, everybody.
Sam, nice.
But all in all, I thought the story was fine in terms of what I wanted from a Star Wars
I feel
story.
like where I feel like this is strongest is it's very much a like an old Republic story, and I think this is where the video games are always strongest. Like you had obviously Knights of the Old Republic, you had even the Old Republic, like the MMO from Bioware, had a fantastic leveling experience. Some of the best Star Wars stories ever are like hidden away in the leveling experience of that game, all set back in that old era. I think everyone is crying out for more stories in the Old Republic era. Like everyone's hoping that the next trilogy they make is an Old Republic trilogy, not carrying forward the story of like the new generation.
I was gonna say, I think people are really crying out because how bad this trilogy has
That's
been.
true.
And like, I mean, a lot of people now look back at the 1, 2, and 3 and go, you know what? They were fucking good
I
films.
actually respect those films way more as a
Totally.
result
A
now,
lot
because
more
at least
ambitious.
they had some sort of like framework. Anyway, I'm not going to get into
Let's
that now.
not do that
We'll
now.
save that for the review of Rise of Skywalker on the
Yes.
20th. But look, I feel like the decision to play in this space of like the ancient Jedi Order and old temples and the old, sort of like the older features of the Star Wars universe was really great. It was such a smart decision by Respawn, and I think they really nailed it. And as well, I think even the more modern aspects, like the Empire, I think was really well sort of told in terms of like the characters that they had there and the stormtroopers and the little banter. Did you hear Stormtrooper banter?
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah.
The one guy's like, you know, there's one Stormtrooper left after you've killed like 5 or
Yes.
6 of them. He's like, okay, I got this.
Yeah,
you know, and
yeah.
he's just like, he dies
Yeah.
straight away. Like, I liked all that stuff. And I especially liked the design of the Empire spaces. Like, when you're on board their space stations and their fortresses and all that sort of stuff, it really just looks incredible. So,
I do, yeah. I think the world. You're right. Like the actual backdrops and the world itself was just so Star Wars.
Yeah,
It was
totally.
such a job well done. And like you jump in and you do feel like you are in the middle of a Star Wars film. I felt like the actual action within those kind of worlds was incredible. It kind of felt like an Avengers movie sometimes.
with the set pieces?
Yeah,
like,
with the stuff,
yeah,
you
some of
know?
the scenes were pretty nuts.
Especially those first 20 minutes. They definitely blew their load in the first 20 minutes. And
I
then
don't know. I think there's other scenes that really compete
there
with
definitely
it
is.
or are better.
There definitely is, but what I'm saying is I think that first 20-minute
Yeah.
block is like some of the most action-packed, and then it does kind of taper off and give you smaller bits of that later
Totally,
on.
totally.
But like that was, I just thought it was insane to see that in a Star Wars kind of sets environment where
Yeah.
it's an like Avengers blowing up things, but it's in Star Wars. It was so well done. But the world, I just thought another job well done. I thoroughly enjoyed
What
it.
did you think of like the traversal? Like, what did you think of like wall running and swinging and puzzle solving? Like, what did you feel of that? Because obviously it's been compared in a big way to Uncharted,
Yep.
which I think is very fair. What are your thoughts on that?
I liked every couple of hours you are given a new ability, and then you can kind of go back to previous areas and then look at new areas. I liked that mechanic in that because I didn't want a world that I could just go everywhere. I wanted this whole like, I'm a Jedi, I need to learn my abilities, and when I've earned those abilities, I can then go and explore more of this world, So I quite liked that mechanic of getting those abilities, and the wall running and all this kind of stuff, and the pushing things down or pulling them to you to actually open new areas. I found that very rewarding.
I feel like, because what I said in my review was like, there's really 2 types of Metroidvania unlocks, okay? There are ones that are just like keys, where it's like, okay, you can double jump now, which means you can reach a ledge that you couldn't reach before,
Yep.
okay? And then there's stuff that I think really sort of like empowers the player to do more interesting things. And I don't think this game really uses its moveset to really ask you to do cool things, and the level design doesn't really like push you in any way. It just feels very static. It's kind of like, cool, here's a wall that you run on, and now you can get over there, and then you got to climb. Maybe you need to combine like a wall run with a swing. Done. But it's never hard, it's never challenging, it's never pushing the player in any way. It's very much just about like, you've unlocked this thing, ergo, you can now do this thing. Do you know what I mean?
Look, I liked the idea towards the end where you had to wall run like 7 times on a certain thing, then force pull the swing to you, and like I felt like that was what I wanted. I wasn't at the end of the game going, I didn't get to use my powers in the environment to the best of my abilities. I thought it was fine for what they were trying to do. That did not stick out to me. I was like, oh man, what a disappointment in terms of the environment and my powers.
I feel though they were pretty minor upgrades. Like, think of it this way: we played Titanfall, right?
Oh no, actually, I
haven't played Titanfall.
I haven't played
ever.
Titanfall.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, let's just say you have played Titanfall. You would know that the movement system in Titanfall is like remarkable. You feel more like a Jedi in Titanfall than you do in this game. Like Cal doesn't feel particularly powerful, and it's not particularly interesting to control him. And I feel like when you're talking about a Jedi, it would have been cool if they really like amped up that sort of stuff and really did some crazy stuff with the powers and the level design. All of this feels quite constrained. Like, it really does feel like 80% or 90% of what you do, Nathan Drake could do it in Uncharted. You know what I mean? So it's not bad by any means, but it just feels a little bit like, oh yeah, I've done this before in Uncharted. But either way, I still had fun. Where I think I had less fun was with the combat. So Sam and I have very different views on this.
I think
so.
yeah.
Let's see what Sam has to say.
Okay, so I think that we have different views ultimately because I feel like you're expecting this to be, because it's been labeled as like Sekiro or FromSoft. Or it.
I'm not expecting it to be that.
Fine. Well, that's from our conversation off camera. That's what it sounded like. When I'm playing this game, I felt like it was a great balance between an action game that you can just play through and feel relatively challenged, and a FromSoft kind of Souls-like game where there is a bit more depth to that. It wasn't as much depth, I think, that it could have been, but I was pleasantly I liked what I got from that.
Look, I totally agree with all of that. And actually, you know, like as I said, I had fun with it. I had fun swinging my lightsaber around and throwing it and doing like my dual lightsaber attacks and whatever. Like it's fun, don't get me wrong. But I feel like there were many instances with the combat where if you're someone that plays like a lot of action melee games, you're gonna look at this and be frustrated by it because, you know, stuff like animations are a big problem where the game really focuses more on animations than it does like hit detection or enemy AI or anything like that. So it's almost like the enemy kind of ignores what you're doing when you're swinging, and it kind of just makes Cal like feel like he's just flailing around. There also isn't like the way the enemies move relative to Cal is really frustrating because he kind of swings his lightsaber in this combo thing and it always feels like the enemy is just an inch out of range and they're kind of edging back. And Sekiro or Dark Souls never really had this problem because they had the ability to close gaps on the enemy really well, both in terms of like a dash move and also when like you swing your weapon, you know, you kind of like edge forward correctly. That was a big problem that I faced in a lot of this where enemies just feel like they're doing these ones, like holding you back like this, and you're like, just let me get an inch closer. Do you know what I mean?
I think that on a couple of things. Number one, I think it's a creative choice to kind of make you feel like the space between you and that enemy is not easily always just right there, so you can just take down that enemy. I think, you know, if they're making a game that I think it's a smart move to make sure that when you are swinging that lightsaber, sometimes you are going to miss, sometimes that AI is going to be out of range, so it creates that difficulty in that environment. And secondly, I don't agree that there wasn't things to get you closer to them.
There definitely was.
There was definitely abilities that you had always at the ready, pretty much. If you had enough, you know, Jedi meter, and which only took 2 swings to even get that halfway full, for you to really close that gap or do some crowd control or do things that kind of, you know, took back the control in that environment with that enemy. So I actually disagree with that personally.
Look, I think my point is impossible to make without someone playing the game and feeling it for themselves because, as I said...
But we've both finished it.
No, but like, I don't think that the gap closer that you're describing is... Because it's so animation-led, because it's all about, like, you pressing these buttons and Cal having these really long wind-up animations, it doesn't feel fluid in a way that, say, as I said, Dark Souls and Sekiro does.
Or God of War, you think?
Or God of War, exactly right. It feels far more floaty, more imprecise, and just more frustrating, you know what I mean? So some people are going to be not bothered at all by that. It was driving me nuts the entire time. I think the other thing that really pissed me off was the way that poise or posture is handled in this game. So similar to Sekiro, there is a poise meter above all enemies' heads, and you know, you can damage them when it's active, but it's harder to damage them. Most of the time they'll block your attacks. And when their poise meter is exhausted, then you can damage them and get a few hits in. The problem with this game is that their poise meter refills almost immediately after you've hit them once or twice. And I think it's just a really bad implementation of a poise meter because Sekiro had a thing where when their posture or poise was broken, they were open to a death blow or you could just wail on them, etc. Right? And it's not like that here. Because you can be mid-combo after having broken their posture and all of a sudden, boom, they've got their posture back, they're blocking you, they're parrying you, and you just kind of have to like, oh, okay, that's what we're doing now, I guess.
Yeah.
You know? It felt like the momentum of combat was constantly interrupted.
Yeah.
And it just pissed me off.
Although FromSoft is like, you know, the god of making those types of games, I get that. I don't know if that they are the gospel of like poise or, you know, posture. I think if they want to do that with their game, that's fine. But I was okay with like, if I can break their posture, do some damage, and then they can quickly recover, and there's like a second chapter to that combat, I was okay with that. Like I wasn't sitting there going, oh. I was more like, okay, that's annoying. Like, you know, let's go round 2 and kill this thing. If I was able to kill them with one, you know, break their posture, then kill them in one combo, then I think there's a problem on their hands where they just have to like flood the whole environment with heaps of enemies to make it then more challenging. And if they went down that route, I think like, okay, cool, there's just more of them to kill. I'd rather have 6 or 7 and each of them is somewhat of a challenge.
I feel like that would be okay for some of the more advanced, like Jedi-trained stormtroopers or like Empire for Inquisitors or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't want to go 3 rounds with an average stormtrooper goon who's just got like a yellow thing on his arm. Like,
yeah, but you weren't going 3 rounds.
You were. Sometimes you would absolutely engage them and then break their guard, and then it would be back up, and then you need to go back in, break it again, and then break it again. And it's like, this is just a bit much. Do you know what I mean? So that was where it was really grinding my gears because, I mean, sure, if you wanted to do it for some of the more advanced troops, I get that. but it just felt like, as I said, combat was too often being interrupted in a way that just felt frustrating. But look, I understand the counter perspective. You want to feel like there's some challenge. You want it to feel like, okay, this is the combat model we've got going. You don't want it to be exactly like Sekiro. You want it to be different. I get all that, and I think that's fair.
Sure.
Personally, I was grinding up against that stuff and not liking it.
I think it'll be interesting to see each person will have their own individual take. But there's some things that I think that people just won't be able to disagree on. The frame drops for one. My God. I was playing on an Xbox S. There was many times where I'm like, how do they ship this in this particular state at this moment? Although it's a great game that, from what I've enjoyed, I was like, come on, guys. Like, there's so many freaking frame drops here. Like, it was sometimes in the middle of combat. It was sometimes just like trying to, traverse certain areas or whatever,
totally.
and you're like falling down because
Yeah.
the whole thing's bugging out.
Yeah.
That was just like absolutely ridiculous.
I was playing on PC and I was getting the same sort of thing. Not as bad.
And that's 2080, right?
Yeah, 2080.
Yeah, I mean,
I was getting it not as bad, but I've definitely seen other clips where I'm like, whoa, man, this should not have shipped like this. No way.
Another thing is, oh my God, getting back to the ship after you've like done a successful mission.
Fuck off with this backtracking.
Just give me like a Zelda thing where they give you a portal after you've killed the boss and you just get into it and you just, mysteriously get to the other side.
And for the record, like, everyone loves to hate on backtracking. I'm actually a big fan of backtracking when it's done right.
When there's a reward for it.
But like, even when it's like, backtracking can be good because it helps build your familiarity with space. You know what I mean? Like, rather than having big, gigantic open worlds, you have smaller spaces that you kind of have to tread over multiple times. I'm okay with that. But I hate it when it's like, go to this place to do this thing. Oh, cool, you've done this thing. Now walk all the way back. And there's nothing going on the way back. It's just walking back, and you're like, dude, fuck off with this. That was the worst.
Yeah, what boggled my mind was like, you've given me an extra ability through this whole kind of journey, right? Then if I've killed this boss, well, sometimes they gave you extra abilities, right? If you've killed that boss, let me use that ability and get like a shortcut, something.
Sometimes they did do that.
I can't really think of that happening now, but like when I was playing at least, maybe I missed those shortcuts because it wasn't clear to me, but I was like, I've killed this boss, now I'm turning around, I just have to go like 20 minutes trying to find where this ship is, Look, they're just small things like that. I mean,
I feel like the other major thing that I struggle with, I didn't actually mention in my review, but it's definitely something I feel. I don't feel like this game needed a bonfire system and respawning enemies. Like, it requires a huge suspension of disbelief to cram this into the Star Wars universe. And I just don't think it added anything to the game. Like, it makes a lot of sense in Sekiro and Dark Souls because moving through enemies is really tough and it's very likely you will die while you're making it from one bonfire to the next, etc. And that makes sense, right? And also, it's just the world. Like, they've built those rules and it all fits. But here, it doesn't fit the world of Star Wars at all. And also, like, you don't really die that much as you're making your way from one bonfire to the next. So it's kind of just like, what's the point of this? If you'd have taken out the respawning enemies entirely and just made those save points, that would have been fine. It would have fit, I think, much better and the game would not be any worse for it.
I agree, actually. When I first saw it, I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, they're implementing this whole system and stuff, but you're right in terms of it doesn't add anything. I think the only thing it maybe tries to kind of lean on is, if you kill enough enemies and you get, your meter to a certain point and then you get a point, you can die within that time and you've got to go and then find that enemy and get those experience points back. So they wanted to give you some sort of barrier to entry for that. I get that. But you're right, like, you weren't dying enough to really justify why you needed to go through an area again and again and fight those enemies. So I get that they wanted to reinforce that this is a Souls-like game and that's why they put that in, but it could have not been there and I don't think people would have even noticed,
Totally agree. But look, I think everything that we just talked about is really, like, I think they're major issues, or I don't know how you really frame them, but I don't think they really matter in the context of how good this game is. Like, I feel like you can definitely take apart all its pieces and tear them apart, but I think at the end of the day, you put all this together, this is one of the best Star Wars experiences I've had
since GOTY.
Fucking years. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just so Star Wars, and not just video games. Like, literally, I had more fun with this than I did with the prequel trilogy. I've definitely had more fun with this than I have with the new trilogy. I mean, it's great Star Wars fodder, you know what I mean? And it just feels good to play something or experience something that's so authentically Star Wars and nails it in just the right way.
I think with, the audience has been so starved for the last, 10, 15 years now, really, of something that's worth their time in the Star Wars world, We thought it was going to maybe be, Star Wars Battlefront when it came out with EA, and it was a meme how shitty and basic it was. And Star Wars Battlefront 2 came around, and that whole thing happened. Then the trilogies and whatever. It's just been one after the other. So I think a lot of people have jumped onto this and gone, thank God, like we've got something now that you can finish for 15, 20 hours. It's been a great re-entry, I think, and I'm looking forward to see what else EA does now, because they've done such a backflip in terms of like, single-player games, man, no one wants them. People do want them. It's breaking records. It's doing very well. And, it is very Star Wars to the core of it. But, if it's not the combat, it's the world. If it's not the world, it's the characters within that. And that kind of story that we've seen time and time again in Star Wars, like a simple kid and they go on a journey and then they end up, kind of getting acquainted with the Force. Like, that's what you want, and this is what it gives you. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Definitely pick it up if you haven't. I wouldn't even say wait for, like, it's probably going to be on sale soon.
You can
but
get it on like Origin Access, Premiere, whatever, for like $10 or whatever.
Exactly.
Just like get the subscription for a month, play it. It's like 12 hours long, by the way. And that's it. You're done with it.
Even if it was full price, I'd say it's worth it. Like, it's actually totally worth it. But like, that's it for today, everybody. And next week, we're done for the year in terms of reviews. This is it.
There's also Shenmue and Disco Elysium.
We're gonna do Shenmue?
I don't think we'll do Shenmue. Maybe you should do Disco.
Okay, let's do Disco Elysium.
Yeah, we'll do that.
And then we're gonna do Game Awards in like 2 weeks. I don't know why we're saying that now, but we got that in 2 weeks. And we got Christmas in like a month, everybody. Let's just keep listing things that are far away. Anyway, that is it, guys. Love you, appreciate you. Yong out.